Welcome to Developer Stories on the Road to MSIX, a podcast for developers that are interested in updating their installers to MSIX. I'm Tim Mangan. In Chapter 4, we looked at the core part of building the MSIX package. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 are going to look at file type associations in MSIX. Specifically, we'll focus on the non-com parts of this, the shell integration command verbs. This chapter is an introduction to understand the general concept of file type associations, or FTAs for short, and to help you understand whether your MSIX packaging needs will be met with a simple solution or if it will require a more complex one. In Chapter 6, we'll show you how to implement that simple solution if that works for you. And Chapter 7, the complex solution needed by some application packages. I often refer to the classes keys as the cesspool of the Windows Registry. Anything can and does get written there. Apps write over each other. Nobody ever cleans it up. And the bad stuff in there rarely causes any noticeable errors. Mistakes are just silently ignored. The classes keys hold file type associations and COM registrations on behalf of all applications. Now we are going to focus on the file type associations here, and specifically the shell integration command verbs in this 3-chapter set. Shell extensions and COM will come later on. FTAs provide a linkage between files and applications based on the file name extension. Now you're currently listening to a file with a .m4a file name extension. Your Windows OS, well, assuming you're on a Windows OS at the moment, was asked to open that file, and it's currently registered with some type of file type association and an application used to play that file. Traditional MSI and EXE application installers can register FTAs under the classes keys located in HKey local machine, as shown here under the HKLM software classes, with subkeys that start with a dot and the file type. That registration can also occur under the HKey current user hive, the difference being whether it affects all users on the operating system or only the currently logged in user. File types traditionally have been defined in the Windows Registry under HKLM or the HKCU classes, with a subkey of that file extension, including the leading dot character. HKey class's root isn't a real registry hive, but it's an overlay that shows HKey local machine software classes key with the HKey current user software classes key layered on top of it. System utilities that do file-associated activities on behalf of the user session, such as the Explorer process that runs your desktop and File Explorer dialogues, are going to read from the HKey class's root hive. No installer should ever write to HKCR, and if it does, it's just going to get redirected to HKCU anyway. Your MSIX package will not need nor even use file type registrations in the Windows Registry. Instead, your application will convey your FTA requirements in the AppX manifest file. The installation of your package will then take that information and write it into new special package-specific area of the registry, separate from all of the other applications. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's just focus on what you have first before we try to migrate things over. There are many setups that an app can use to register FTAs in the Windows Registry, and in general, the associations can include fixed icons for display, the shell integration command verbs that we're interested in here, shell extensions and shell new as well, persistent handlers, and these management concepts such as FTA prog IDs, open with list, and open with prog IDs. By the way, when we migrate into MSIX, those FTA prog IDs will be simplified out, which is just fine. And while the OS includes many ways of handling FTA conflict when more than one application wants to work with a given file type, like the open withs here, with MSIX, Microsoft takes the stance that your package defines what you want, but the end user chooses which app to default and not your installer. But we aren't going to go into everything there is about FTAs in these videos. We're going to concentrate on the migration of the FTA icon and those shell integration command verbs. Those standard item verbs that you see when you right-click on a file that'll start an application, along with passing along any command line arguments that are needed to start the application. Things like open and edit. In the registry for non-packaged apps, this looks like the relatively simple fictional FTA that you see registered here. It has an icon defined and two shell integration verbs. Looking at the open and play, you see a subkey here named command, and the value of the default item under that key provides the path to the command to be run and any command line arguments. If %1 is included in the argument list, that will be replaced by the value of the full path to the file that the user right-clicked on. If %1 does not appear in the argument list, as is the case here, the full path of the file is then appended to the end of any argument list. The names of the keys under the shell key dictate what the shell menu item that your end user will see when they right-click. Microsoft has always heavily encouraged vendors to use a standard set of verbs like open, edit, and play in order to provide a consistent environment for the end user. While most vendors adhere to that list, you're not really restricted to only that list. Outside of this simple case, the FTA may use other registration entries, including the prog IDs, open lists, and open with prog IDs that we talked about earlier. And we're going to ignore those in this episode. Generally speaking, you'll find that if you're using those today, you'll be undoing that redirection when you migrate these registry settings into the AppX manifest file. But it's not really a big deal. At the outset of this chapter, I said that the introduction was really about determining whether you would be using a simple solution for migrating or if you'll need to use the more complex one. The answer to that depends on the complexity of your FTAs, and you'll need to look at that complexity with an eye for whether or not the change in hierarchy from the Windows Registry to your app manifest file forces you to use a more complex solution. The hierarchy of the Windows Registry FTA is shown here. And here is the hierarchy as imposed by the AppX manifest schemas. For many applications, the hierarchy is just upside down, and a simple migration is all that you'll need. In the fictional FTA shown earlier, the mappings will end up looking like this. We'll get into the details about how to perform the migration of this FTA using the simple solution in Chapter 6 of the series later on. Now let's look at the setup for the .fic2 FTA. It has the same things in the Windows Registry that we had for the .fic1, but there's a shell integration third verb. The target command for both the open and shell verbs is the same exe, appexe1, with different arguments. But the target command for the edit verb is a different exe named appexe2. The mappings for this might look like what you see on the right. Except that we can't do this in the AppX manifest file due to both hierarchy and uniqueness rules of the AppX manifest schemas. In the AppX manifest, the verb element implies the target executable for that verb by being placed under an application element that contains the appropriate executable parameter on it. So because app2 is a different executable element, it has to be placed under a different application element. But at the same time, the same file type may not be defined under two different application elements the way that we're showing it here. This is one of those uniqueness rules built into the XML schema set. So if you have a file type that requires shell integration verbs that point to two different target EXEs, you'll need a more complicated solution, and we're going to show you how to do that in Chapter 7 of the series. So in the next two episodes, we'll break out our Visual Studio and the WAP project. We'll create great solutions for both the simple case in Chapter 6 and then the more complicated case in Chapter 7. This concludes this chapter of The Road to MSIX. If you missed earlier chapters, you can get them from the Tmergent LinkedIn page or our YouTube channel. Keep an eye out for new chapters too. You can see some of the ones that we're planning here. But I'd also love to do a podcast with you about your experiences in creating MSIX packages. Just contact me on LinkedIn. I'm Tim Mangan on The Road to MSIX. Thanks for listening.